Wilbur, open this door. No response. Open this door or I'm kicking you off at the next port. Silence. Well, that's just fantastic. Next thing you know, he'll be calling himself Captain. He turns around, and his words falter, his half-hearted attempt at a smile slipping from his lips in an instant. Phil has dropped into one of the spare chairs in the room. He's hunched over, his head in his hands, and his hair falling forward to curtain his face. His shoulders are trembling, though with sorrow or anger, Technoblade can't quite tell. Guess I should have seen this coming, huh? Phil asks, followed by a breathy, hollow chuckle. Kid's always been stubborn as shit. Guess he got it from me. He looks up at Technoblade then, and his gaze is sad and tired, his eyes red-rimmed and puffy underneath. He won't let us out until we talk. He means every word of that. Guess we'll be here a while then. Phil doesn't respond. True to his word, Wilbur doesn't let them out. It's nearly sundown, and they've seen neither hide nor hair from him. Technoblade's practically paced a trench into the floorboards, whereas Phil is eyeing the window as if considering taking a swim. They're both tired and hungry and stressed, and Technoblade is damn near his breaking point. He's sick of the unspoken tension, of the quiet, of the thread between them that's damn near ready to snap with so much as a glance in the wrong direction. The silence is practically unbearable. Nothing like the comfortable quiet they'd once shared. He's had enough. If Phil won't talk, he will. Listen, Phil, whatever you have to say, mate, I don't want to hear it. I'm sorry? I thought you didn't want to associate with criminals. No, Phil, that's not... What was it you said? The only thing a pirate's good for is the gallows. Come to escort me there yourself, again? Phil, will you just shut up and listen to me for once? Phil's jaws click shut. Yes, Captain. He spits out, and then falls silent. Technoblade fixes him with a pointed glare, but the heat of his anger dies when his gaze falls once more on the dark circles beneath his friend's eyes, and the tremor in his shoulders. It's easy to forget he isn't the only one affected by what happened, both of them having had old wounds ripped wide by the argument. Both of them are at fault, both of them suffering. But all it takes is one look at Phil to remind him, because his friend should never look so worn, so closed off from the world around him in his pain. He doesn't look so much angry as he does defensive, like a cornered animal biting at the hands that reach for him. There's a shadow in his gaze, something dark and haunted and pained, and his hand is drifting to his chest, toward the bandages where beneath he knows the man is forever marked. His bitter words from their fight, spat in fury and self-defense and a frantic scramble to get the last word in, suddenly echo in his mind. You could have stopped. You could have announced piracy after his parents' execution. Gods. He suddenly feels sick. Phil. He starts again, this time softer. Phil's fists clench, white-knuckled, so hard his nails bite into his skin and start to draw blood. Technoblade moves instinctively to grab his friend's wrists and pull them close, but the second his fingers brush skin, Phil rips his hands out of reach with a low hiss. Icy blue eyes dart up to meet his gaze challengingly, every inch of Phil bristling, and ready for a fight. Technoblade is tired of fighting. Listen. He starts, and takes a step back, taking the hint and giving the man his space. I know we're both... He trails off, gesturing vaguely at the space between them. But can you just hear me out? We can't exactly go anywhere, and I just want to talk, Phil. Phil's gaze lifts to meet his. There's anger there, but it's dulled by exhaustion and sorrow, and it seems as though the fight is quickly draining out of him. Fine. He finally answers. It's not like there's much else to do, mate. Technoblade settles down into a chair across from Phil. He settles his hands in his lap and tries not to notice how his prosthetic suddenly feels a lot heavier. He tries not to think about Phil's red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. He tries not to think about the daunting conversation ahead of him. I want to apologize, he says, deciding to forego any further procrastination. For what I said back there. That stuff I said about your past, about pirates, I didn't mean it. Not any of it. And he sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose, unable to meet Phil's gaze. Maybe I did before. Maybe I did not even that long ago, but not anymore. Phil doesn't answer. He remembers a time, not that long ago, where he'd thanked the man for opening up, for allowing him to see his darkest secrets. And now he'd gone and exposed them for everyone. His past, his family, his curse. He'd taken that chance away from Phil. Taken away that comfort, too. I shouldn't have brought it up. Not after you trusted me with it. No. Phil answers softly. You shouldn't have. His words hang in the air for a few minutes before he draws in a shuddering breath, pinching his brows. And I shouldn't have either. Technoblade blinks, but Phil just keeps going. Shit, sorry, I'm not... He waves a hand, pinching his brow in his fingers. I'm not good at this shit, mate, but I didn't mean what I said either. I just got caught up in it. His jaw works, like he wants to say more, his eyes a storm of emotion. I was scared, and I wasn't being fair. I didn't give you a chance to explain yourself. Every word is tense and forced, and Technoblade is once more reminded of how similar they truly are. Neither willing to back down, neither willing to show weakness, both of them uncertain and clumsy when it comes to emotions. It's okay, Phil. He murmurs honestly. It's true. The ache in his chest has dulled, the burning heat of the moment all but ashes. Now that he can see Phil, truly see him in all of his broken pieces, the bitterness has no place in his heart anymore. We both said things we didn't mean. I said you were just like the others. Yeah, and I spouted nothing but old Navy propaganda at you. I think that's pretty justified. But I called you a traitor. And I told you you deserved to be hung. I told you to... It's nothing I haven't told myself. Techno. Phil looks heartbroken. Surely you don't really think that. Technoblade can't meet his gaze. He doesn't want to talk about that. Not right now. Luckily for him, Phil seems to recognize this. God, we're a mess, aren't we? Phil barks out a bitter laugh, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. A disgraced pirate captain and a Navy turncoat. What a lovely pair we make. Funny, isn't it? Technoblade rasps dryly, his own lips twitching. The universe has an odd way of working. Phil leans back. Wouldn't change it though, I don't think. It's kinda charming in a fucked sort of way. Pirates in the Navy. Enemies from the very start. A captain and his prisoner. Who would have thought the two of us would end up as friends in the end? His face falls. His voice falters, his expression suddenly lost and confused and a little bit sad. He shoots a quick look Technoblade's way, immediately backtracking when he makes eye contact. Technoblade's stomach lurches as he realizes the source of Phil's difficulty. He swallows back his own grief at the thought, at the idea of losing the one true friend he's ever had. He's not ready to let go. Despite everything, he doesn't want to. And so, slowly, carefully, he extends a hand Phil's way, holding his breath as the man gives it a wary look. The whole world seems to hold its breath for a moment, and Technoblade alongside it. Then, tentatively, Phil takes it, their fingers curling comfortably together. His friend's eyes are wide, fixed on their interlocked hands as if he can't quite believe it. Technoblade is quick to abolish those fears. "You're my friend, Phil," Technoblade says softly. "Even with everything that happened, you're still my friend. The first one I've ever really had. Nothing's gonna change that. Unless that's not..." He trails off, searching Phil's face for any sign of hesitation. He'd never doubted this before, not for a second. But they'd also never fought before. Not as friends. Never like this. Never so harsh. Never so personal. "Mate," Phil breathes. "You're not..." His mouth opens and closes, his fingers tightening around Technoblade's. "I thought you wanted out. Out of the crew, out of piracy. Back to your peaceful life at the docks. Or with the Navy." "No." Technoblade's immediate rejection surprises even himself. "I don't think I can ever go back. Even if I wanted to. I left, Phil. Abandoned my post after they took my hand. There's no greater shame than fleeing from disgrace. Dream was my only way back in." "Oh." Phil's brow furrows. Technoblade can see the wheels turning in his mind, can practically see the images of the battle replaying behind blue eyes. "Phil, listen to me," he says firmly, squeezing his friend's hand tightly and forcing him to look into his eyes. "My hesitation back then, me considering his offer, that was a mistake. It seemed so easy, so tempting to just go back to how things used to be, but I could never do that. Not to you, or the crew. I would never betray you, not for anything. I swear it to you on my life." "That's good," Phil breathes. "That's... fuck, mate, His breathing hitches, his free hand pulling away to scrub at his eyes with his sleeve. His words dwindle into sniffles, the air between them growing quiet. The silence drags on for a while, the both of them reeling in the whiplash of their emotions, struggling to pull themselves together in the wake of their revelations. They don't let go, though, clinging to one another amidst the storm even as their walls threaten to come crashing down around them. But even as the sky begins to clear, as the trembling begins to still and the tears slow, there's still one more wave in their path. There's one more thing left to be said. Technoblade is the first to take the plunge. "I can't forgive you, Phil," he murmurs gently. "Not entirely. Not yet." Phil cracks a wry grin through bleary eyes. "It's only fair, mate. Can't say I've forgiven everything either." Technoblade winces, but nods. It's a stumbling block, that's certain, but the hopelessness he'd felt before is gone. Days ago, he would have considered this a failure, a dead end with no escape, a mountain too steep to climb, but Phil's hand in his is steady, as is his gaze, and instead of fear, it fills him instead with a wild, desperate hope. They've given each other a second chance. That's enough. "Right," Phil suddenly says with a laugh. "I think that's enough crying for today, don't you think?" Phil breaks off mid-sentence. His gaze is fixed on the far side of the room, on Technoblade's old wooden desk, on its contents, on his journal. It's opened wide, left open from the late hours of the night where Technoblade had sat, poring over the names again and again, murmuring quiet apologies to whoever might be listening. Their names are scrawled in dark ink, and Technoblade has no doubt that Phil's keen eyes can read them, even from this far away. And judging by the haunted look in the man's eyes, he knows exactly what they mean. Phil makes his way over, slowly, carefully, quietly. His gaze never leaves the book as he stops beside it, one hand extending to trace the ink with his finger. There's a deep sadness in his eyes that keeps Technoblade from snapping at him, from chasing him away. Phil mouths each name, his free hand white-knuckled at his side, and turns the page. His mouth is a thin line as he seems to register the sheer number of names written time and time again on the parchment. And then, finally, Phil speaks. "I'm sorry." The apology, simple and small and fragile, hangs heavy in the air. Technoblade isn't sure who it's for, him or his fallen crew. Phil's chin is practically in his chest, his head bowed low, his hands clenched at his sides as he takes a step back, away from the ledger. Technoblade doesn't need to ask to know what words are ringing through his mind, because they haunt him, too. "You were the one who caused this in the first place." Technoblade can barely breathe. "Phil, wait," he says softly, and his heart aches as his friend's face turns away from him, ashamed. Phil looks angry, his gaze shadowed, his expression dark. But the anger is no longer aimed toward Technoblade. "You were right, mate," Phil murmurs. "It is my fault. If I hadn't taken that damned locket, your crew would still be here. They'd still be alive. And so would mine." It's then that Technoblade remembers. Wilbur and Fundy had been the only ones to be pulled from the wreckage. "I'm sorry," Phil says again, and his shoulders shudder with his next exhale, his whole body bowing beneath the weight of his sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Techno, for everything." Technoblade moves without thinking. His hands are on Phil's shoulders before he has a moment to consider the potential consequences, his fingers reaching to curl around his cheek and tilt his chin upward, forcing his gaze up from the floor. There's a heartbeat after, where he realizes what he's done, and Phil does too, his eyes widening and his shoulders tensing. But Phil doesn't pull away. He stands eerily still for a moment, neither daring to even breathe, before he finally leans into the careful touch. There's a glassy shine in Phil's eyes, pale blue, a dull gray in the wake of his guilt. His cheeks are flushed pink with shame, and he can't seem to meet Technoblade's gaze. Not fully. There's a world of weight upon his shoulders, his whole body trembling as though ready to crumble. Technoblade can't reconcile this man with the one he was fighting with before. Can't bring himself to feel the same anger he once might have. They're both tired, and hurt, and grieving. And he doesn't have the energy to keep striking out, going for the low blows again and again. And neither does Phil. Technoblade can practically see the guilt consuming him, knows that very same guilt like the back of his hand. He knows he's to blame for it as well, at least partially. And he'll be damned if he lets Phil think he's responsible for another second. "Phil, listen to me," he says quietly. "What happened wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known what was going to happen when you took it. But I still took it." "You did." Technoblade agrees. "But if you'd known about the curse, you wouldn't have stolen it?" "Gods, no." Phil's eyes squeeze shut. His head tries to duck away, but Technoblade holds him firmly there. Because of me, Fuck, I don't... His voice pitches into something almost frantic, desperately grasping at straws. So many people are dead, Techno. So much has gone wrong, and I don't know how many more will get hurt. I don't know when it's gonna end. That's it. It's gonna end when we put that damned thing back where it belongs. Phil's eyes water anew. We? Yeah, Technoblade says, and he surprises himself with the strength of his resolution. We. You and me. Techno. Phil's hands raise, shakily, to return his touch, clinging tightly to his shirt. This is going to be like sailing into the gates of hell itself, mate. I'll follow you there, then, Technoblade swears. And Phil laughs. His strained grimace splinters into a watery smile, his whole body surging forward to wrap Technoblade up in a firm embrace, his chest hitching with a sound halfway between a giggle and a hiccuping sob. Technoblade catches him easily, his arms curling carefully behind the smaller man's shoulders and waist, lifting him up a little as a surge of protectiveness flares in his chest. I told you I wouldn't leave you, Technoblade murmurs, and his heart flutters warmly as Phil clings tighter to him. I promised, and I don't go breaking promises, especially not ones I make to you. You're a fucking idiot. Phil chuckles through tears, still not letting go. Maybe, Technoblade answers, his lips twitching in a weary smile of his own. But you're stuck with me. I still owe you, right? Phil snorts, shaking his head weakly into Technoblade's chest. You owe me a lot for how much you've made me cry, mate. For you, the world, Phil. Phil rolls his eyes. It's less convincing amidst the tears. Dumbass. Yeah, but you love me. Shut. Aw, are you crying over little old me? Technoblade teases around the burn in his own eyes, and Phil grumbles in mock annoyance, his cheeks flushing. You're getting sentimental, old man. I'm not old, Phil protests weakly. Mate, we're like the same age. Nah. Technoblade protests jokingly, resting his chin atop the shorter man's head. I'm still young and spry. The crew's waiting for you to start complaining about your old bones any day now. I've heard Tommy and Tubbo placing bets. Mate, Phil wheezes. He trails off into soft giggles, relaxing in Technoblade's arms, his grip tightening to something much more comfortable. His brow furrows, some of the tension returning to his face. Technoblade hums disapprovingly, reaching up to gently pat at the side of his friend's face. What are you thinking in there, Phil? Phil sighs. That was bad. It was. I don't want to fight like that again. Me neither. Technoblade agrees quietly. I'm not good at this whole friends thing, Techno. You should know that ahead of time. I'll probably end up fucking shit up again. Technoblade pretends to look contemplative. You really think I'm going to be any better, Phil? Which one of us was a Navy captain again? Phil giggles, breathy and light, punctuated by another hiccup. Right, so we're both emotionally repressed fucks raised out in the middle of the ocean. What could go wrong? A lot, apparently. It's not every day you render Tommy speechless. Phil's grin splits a little wider. His giggles are louder now, his shoulders shaking from the effort. Oh my fuck, mate, stop my ribs. He's practically doubled over, one arm folded across his ribs, his forehead pressing into Technoblade's collarbone as his cheeks flush pink. It's the most genuine smile Technoblade's seen from him in a few days, and it makes the pain and weariness of the journey lessen at the sight of it. Obligingly, he does not press the matter, but he hums chidingly as Phil playfully bumps at his shoulder, only to recoil with a hiss as he aggravates his ribs yet again. He snorts at the man, warm affection flickering where white-hot rage had burned not long ago. It's a much better feeling. We're gonna have to bust out of here soon. Technoblade grunts, once Phil's giggles have died down. The crew's gonna think we're in here killing each other with all the fuss you're making. Phil flips him off, breathless. Technoblade shakes his head with a wry grin, then sobers. This isn't gonna fix everything, Phil. Phil's smile falters. The curse? They have to know, Phil. They need to know what they're getting into. I know, Phil says, and takes a steadying breath. I just wish... I don't know. Gotta just get it over with, I guess. Technoblade's heart aches for the choice he took away from Phil, for the position he'd put him in. But while he'd been the one to point the accusatory finger in the beginning, it'd be nice to have you with me, mate. Technoblade smiles, and reaches down to squeeze Phil's hand. I helped get you into this mess. I'll help get you out. Phil gives a shaky grin. Might need to do some recruiting after this one, Techno. Something tells me we're gonna be short-staffed for the big journey. Nah, Technoblade says. You're underestimating how much these idiots love you, Phil. They'll follow you, too. They'll follow you? Phil. Technoblade's throat suddenly threatens to close up with emotion, his heart pounding wildly with joy and affection and gratitude all at once. Aw, don't look at me like that, mate. But I hired you in as a captain, right? Phil winks. You're not gonna try and cheat your way out of it, are you? I guess not. And Phil holds out a hand to shake, his gaze sparkling with something warm. Shall we, Captain? Technoblade takes it. After you, Phil. He rumbles, and they turn to confront the next challenge together. Telling the crew goes about how he expected. Phil gathers them around him, amidst confused murmurs at the sight of their captain and first mate once again side by side. Technoblade sticks close nearby, as promised, his shoulder brushing Phil's, and his gaze leveled challengingly for any poor soul daring enough to try and interrupt. Phil weaves his tale, a tale of golden shores and promised bounties, of a missing piece to the legend and the tragic aftermath that followed. He speaks of storms and misfiring pistols and tragic accidents, and of a mutiny in self-defense. Technoblade watches as Tommy's eyes soften, as his face turns toward Wilbur, with something apologetic murmured on his lips. He watches as Wilbur's expression warms too, and he pulls the kid into a sideways embrace, ruffling his hair as he squawks quiet protests. Phil holds out the locket in his trembling hand, and a dozen eyes follow the golden chain as it swings back and forth. Their faces are painted with a myriad of expressions: shock, confusion, even fear. But to his surprise, Technoblade doesn't see any anger. Even as Phil's words falter, even as his head begins to hang in shame, even as his voice trails into a hollow apology, the crew doesn't turn their wrath on him. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, Phil says, his expression downcast. You lot deserved to know exactly what you were getting into, and I was a coward for not being honest from the start. He seems to hesitate for a moment, before continuing, this time with a voice that can't quite withhold his sorrow. If you want to leave, we'll make port one last time before making for the island. You're free to leave. Take what you've earned and make off your safety. It won't be held against you. Technoblade watches the crew ripple with surprise, a few soft murmurs filling the quiet night air. Phil and I are going to try and break the curse. One way or another, we're getting to that island, or dying trying. His voice is strong as he steps forward to address the crew. I know you don't owe me any loyalty. I know I've done nothing but throw away your trust in me. I don't expect things to be the same way they were, but all I'm asking for is a chance. If not for me, than for Phil, at least. He shoots his friend a long look and hopes Phil is able to feel his heart in every word. He deserves to be free. Phil shoots him a watery smile, and Technoblade knows he understands. Right. Phil breathes shakily, rocking back on his heels. Now you all know. For a moment, the crew is quiet, just watching them. With every second that passes, Technoblade can feel Phil's tension growing, can see the way his hand twitches nervously toward the cutlass at his belt. He's scared, terrified he's just heartbeats away from being turned on again, from losing everything. But Technoblade knows better, even if Phil doesn't. Phil is loved. He just needs them to show him. Nikki is the first to approach Phil. Nikki, Crack! Phil staggers backward, clutching a hand to his cheek. Seconds later, Nikki lowers her hand and pulls him into a fierce hug. You idiot, she says, her voice muffled into his collar, her eyes wet with tears. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Phil doesn't respond. He just lets out a long, tired sigh and returns the embrace, resting his chin atop her head. The others are quick to join after that, Tommy and Tubbo squeezing close to ruffle Phil's hair and pat his back. Ronbu weasels up close too, making that same happy rumbling noise he had before as he eases into Phil's arms. Jack leans in to bump his shoulder against Phil's, with a crooked smile and a wink that makes the man muffle a snort. Wilbur has his hand on Phil's other shoulder, just resting, occasionally squeezing when Phil leans into his touch. Can't get rid of us that easily, asshole, Tommy quips, and Tubbo cackles his agreement. Besides, not like there's anything better to do. Port is boring. Been there, stole that. Can't fight a curse without your gunner, boss man. Tubbo agrees. You gave me a second chance. Ronbu murmurs. I think you deserve one too. Technoblade watches on with a fond smile, but can't deny the ache in his chest as he watches them. There's a small spot to Phil's side, a space he could probably fit in if he squeezed. It would be so easy to fold himself into their midst, to be one of them again. But his feet feel frozen, as if nailed to the deck, and his breathing is hitching with something pained and lonely and... You comin', mate? Phil calls. He's wriggled an arm free, his hand reaching playfully out for Technoblade's. Hopeful eyes turn his way, Tommy's teasing grin softening, Ronbu's purr strengthening, Nikki reaching out a hand beside Phil's. It's like looking at the sunrise, warm and beautiful and perfect in a way he'll never be able to capture in words. It's a part of him he didn't know he was missing, the missing piece to his broken fragments, the part that will put everything together again. It's an open invitation, a hand outstretched, a second chance he doesn't deserve and yet has somehow been gifted. It's everything he's ever wanted and yet thought he'd never have. Technoblade has never been a greedy man, always giving more than he gets, never asking for what his heart truly desires. Just this once, Technoblade allows himself to be selfish. Yeah, he finally says, and stumbles forward. Phil's hand meets him halfway, tugging him close, and he falls against his friend as steady arms curl around him. Phil's head immediately burrows into the crook of his neck, Nikki's arm entwining with Phil's across his waist. Tubbo's hand lifting up to snatch the hat off his head before Tommy's fingers begin to playfully ruffle at his hair. He hears Jack mutter something teasing, but fond, and Ronbu's hand is clasped tightly around his own. It's a jumble of bodies and limbs and emotions and tears, his shirt dampening beneath Phil's cheek. It's messy, and the sun beating down on their backs makes it a little uncomfortable. But every touch has him nearly sobbing, every gentle assurance of love like music to his ears. Here, in their arms, he's warm. He's safe. He's loved. He's home.